This is Musical Talk.
Musical Talk.
The UK's independent musical theatre podcast.
Musical Talk. The UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode of Musical Talk. My name is Nick Hudson. It's a transatlantic special today. You're going to be hearing from our resident Yanks, Mike Gordon-Shapiro and David Herzog. In the first discussion, Mike and Tonia and I talked about Hamilton, an American musical that starts its previews tomorrow at the beautifully restored Victoria Palace Theatre. And then David Herzog talks to Jon Peterson, star of such shows as Cabaret, Cats and George M. Cohan tonight. So let's get the episode rolling with the discussion about Hamilton.
You're listening to Musical Talk.
I'm sat here with Tonia. Hello, Tonia.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm alright, thank you.
And joining us all the way from Hollywood, California, is our good friend Mike Shapiro. Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm actually in Van Nuys, but we can say Hollywood.
It's all Hollywood to me. It's all, beautiful palm trees and sunshine. Mike, we want to talk to you about Hamilton because, you've seen it effectively, haven't you? And when we planned this episode, I was kind of saying, I'm not going to go and see Hamilton. I'll wait until it's affordable and blah, 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 blah. Unlike everyone else in the room, I haven't listened to more than 90 seconds of it, I would say. I want to save it for the environment in which it's meant to be seen, which is a theatre. Do you agree, Mike? Is that a good choice? Or should I dedicate myself to listening to the 46 tracks on the cast? Tonia's nodding her head.
I think this is a rare case where it's actually best to listen to the cast album before you see the show.
And thus ends the episode. Goodbye.
Yep, see you next time.
Yeah.
There are a couple of reasons. One is practical, and that is the diction of the characters is a very contemporary style that draws heavily from American hip-hop. The words fly by. There's a lot of slang. There's a lot of turns of phrase. There's a lot of turns of phrase, and it's not always easy to hear the enunciation of individual words. There are a couple of speed raps that are literally incomprehensible in the theater, I would argue, from any seat. So by listening to the cast album, you're kind of oriented. You have some basic idea of what's going on, which may be harder to get on your first seeing of the show. I certainly found it useful to listen to the album before. And I would argue I didn't really understand what the show was about until after I saw it and I listened to the cast album again. So that's about as strong as an endorsement for the idea as I can give you.
And Mike will know that he was badgering me for ages to actually listen to this. And I listened to about 90 seconds and I just texted him I can't listen to this anymore because I just don't understand it. And you were just listen a bit more and just try and get into it. And actually, after a while, your ear just adjusts to it.
It's like when I meet you after a while.
Yeah, no, because I just... Yeah.
Is that an inherent flaw, though, do you think, Mike?
It definitely is a drawback, and it ties into the style of lyrics, which are drawing from hip-hop tradition and not musical theater tradition, which sacrifices a certain degree of intelligibility for virtuosity. So, yes, it's a flaw. I don't think it's a terminal flaw, but it does mean that you have to approach this show a little differently than you may be used to.
Audiences in the UK won't know the history of it that well as well. I think that helps. American audiences probably didn't struggle to understand it that much because this is an area of history they're a bit more familiar with, whereas over here I think it's wise to listen to it, otherwise you might not actually be sure what's going on because it's just not something Britons are familiar with.
It wasn't something the Americans were that familiar with until the musical, is that correct, Mike?
It is. Hamilton prior to the show was perhaps not the most glorious of the founding fathers. If you try to get people excited about the history of U.S. banking policy, they don't necessarily think that would be a great idea for a show. I'm totally into that. Yeah, exactly. It does help to acquaint yourself a little bit with the details of the history because a lot of things happen in the show and they fly by.
Yeah, it's 20 years of history confined into 2.5 hours.
To give you a rough overview, Act 1 focuses more on the American War for Independence, and Act 2 focuses more on the establishing of the precursor to the modern American government, the establishing the Constitution, the decision if we're going to have a strong central government or one predominated by many states' rights and states' powers. So the former is a little easier to sit down and understand as it happens, but the second act can leave you a little bit aswim in all the details.
Why, Mike, do you think is it that people love this show? Is it purely because of the vocal acrobatics we're seeing on stage? Is it a story that do you relate to Hamilton? Because it's not nice, is he? I mean, we're going to do an episode about villains soon, and I was chatting to someone the other day, and he said he thinks one of the greatest villains in musical theatre is Hamilton.
So to answer your first question, I think there are a number of reasons the show is popular. The music is very stirring. It's dramatic, it's exciting, and it's very contemporary. And it's unusual to hear hip-hop idioms in musical theater. The last big installment we had of this idea was In the Heights, and In the Heights had a contemporary setting. So this is something that's very striking and unusual. The character of Hamilton is a real-life person being adapted for the stage, so he doesn't fit neatly into the good guy, bad guy dichotomy. There are things he does. There are points in the show where he's very sympathetic as a character, and we really relate to him. And there are some times where he loses his moral compass and drifts. And that's part of his arc as a character. I think calling him a villain would definitely be going a little too far.
Yeah.
But there are points in the show where we don't care about what he cares about as much as others. And it's worth noting that the show, despite the mixed virtues of its protagonist, is not morally neutral. What I mean by that is that when Hamilton does something that's wrong, it's presented to us as something that's wrong. It's a flaw. Sometimes the chorus seems to sing in dismay in response to something he's doing that's bad. Whereas, for a contrast object, think of a show like Barnum. Barnum also has some good and bad qualities, but when Barnum makes a decision to cheat on his wife, it's presented almost heroically to us at the end of the first act. So the editorial viewpoint of Barnum never seems to come down firmly on saying, this is bad, this is Barnum losing his way. It just kind of presents things in a cavalcade of events. Whereas in Hamilton, there's definitely a moralistic tone. It's probably not the right word, but the show is letting you know that somebody's doing something good or bad, and that at least makes it seem as if it's intentional.
The thing is, Lin-Manuel, I'm never going to be able to say that name.
Lin-Manuel Miranda.
The thing is, he could have actually taken a decision to shy away from those aspects of Hamilton's character, but he really doesn't. He actually includes those in the musical. He could shy away from them because Hamilton is supposed to be his hero in the sense that he's what the musical is about, and maybe people going into it will expect him to be this amazing heroic character, which he is in many aspects, but he doesn't shy away from his flaws either.
He's a real human.
Yeah, he's a real human. I think that is something that he really manages to get across in this musical.
What I love also about what Hamilton is doing here is that it is truly a 21st century musical, and the fact that Cameron Mackintosh has rebuilt the theatre this show is going into, the Victoria Palace. He spent £50 million redoing the theatre, designed with this musical in mind. They put boxes in to make it seem like a kind of a theatre of the 18th century. There are no tickets for this show. It's all paperless. So you have to present your printed email. The music represents this as well, doesn't it? This isn't hip-hop for the sake of being comedic, which a lot of musicals do. Why do you think hip-hop is in this? And would it work if it was written, this story, by, say, Bublé and Schoenberg in the 80s?
It would definitely be a completely different show. In some ways, Hamilton is the spiritual descendant of Jesus Christ Superstar, in that you're taking a historical topic and recasting it in contemporary terms and contemporary idioms with music, which we don't associate from the era. I think what makes hip-hop so successful in the show is that it's intrinsically an expository style of music. The lyrical density is so dense that you convey a lot. You can convey a lot of information.
Your destiny
by rap. If you think of just the rate of lyrics over time, if you drew a little graph, traditional ballad singing doesn't give a lot of information, whereas hip hop can present quite a bit in a short period of time. So it's very well suited for a story that's this complicated. There's just a lot to get across, and rap as a technique works very well for giving all that information.
This is something that I think is one of the best things about it. It's not rap for rap's sake. It is rap. It lends itself to the action, the drama. The battles, particularly, that it's quite useful in the battle sections because there's like a whole month's battle condensed into like 4 or 5 minutes, which you can do with rap. If you use Les Mis as an example.
Tonia's the expert, by the way.
No. Les Mis is a great example. I think it could have been so easy to take the subject, it and do it in a really melodramatic Les Mis, long-winded musical. And you always complain about Les Mis in the sense that you don't know who any of the
I never complain about Les Mis.
It's in that you don't know who any of the characters are. It's really long-winded, and you don't know whereabouts, what point in history you're in, and then use projections to get that across. Whereas in Hamilton, the story is quite rapidly paced because the rap lends itself to that. The characters always tell you throughout what point in history you're at, which is fantastic. So you always know who everybody is. But each character also has a little theme that they sing over again. So Eliza has her little Eliza, and every time someone refers to Eliza, they use that little, theme, so you know who she is.
Leitmotif.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, which is all the way back from opera, interestingly
Wagner.
enough. In a way, it's kind of respectful to what's come before in the sense that it's very much like Les Mis in the sense that it's sung through, but arguably it's much more successful a musical than Les Mis because you always know what point in history you're at because they're always telling you what point in history you're at. You always know who everybody is. So, like I said, they could have easily done this in a Les Mis melodramatic style, but the fact that they've gone for rap actually lends itself much, much better because many pop songs have hooks in them, and all the way through they have these little thematic hooks which they use over and over and over again, so you always know what's going on.
But it's not all hip-hop, is it? I mean, the snippets I've listened to of the cast recording, there are elements of jazz, Victorian music hall, I believe, is in there.
Beatles, 60s
yeah,
style,
so rock and
pop
roll
songs.
and all that kind of stuff. For the older characters, Tonia, you were saying that it goes
so
into
like
more...
Jefferson, like a jazzy style. But also when Burr decides that he's no longer going to wait for it and actually start putting himself forward, he does this kind of half rapped, but with like a jazzy kind of element to it as well. The room where it happens is what I'm talking about. He's doing this rap,
okay.
but it's got like a jazzy element too because he changes sides, doesn't he? So it's like this song blends the two together, which is really, really clever.
There's sort of a Minnie the Moocher-esque kind of old school swing to that, which I think is less reflective of Burr, but more the wheeling and dealing of the political machine, which he is really talking about. When Burr has his song earlier, it's not really a pivotal moment, but it's a big dramatic solo, which is Wait For It. That's full-blown contemporary, kind of R&B influenced pop. I think one of the most brilliant musical associations is giving a Britpop song, a kind of a 60s era Beatles-esque song, a very light and fluffy character to King George being, that's how he manifests. And it's a catchy song. It really is. It's one of my favorites in the show, but it stylistically makes sense.
Yeah, it does, because the farmer that we hear speaking before, that's on the side of the British, and King George, they never rap. The rap is the language of the revolutionary characters, so it gives a distinction. So not only is it really clever, but there's that distinction between the two sides, and they use different styles to show that too. It is a great song. My favourite line in that whole song, and I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, is when you're gone, I'll go mad, so don't throw away this thing we had. And actually King George did go mad. So I just love those little history things that he pops into there every now and again, because he does allude to history all the way through, and I just love the fact that that's in there. And I don't know if anyone else has picked up on it, but I just love that little history fact chucked in there. I think that was it's really nerdy.
What's also so charming about that song is that King George's monarchical kingly sway over the United States is represented metaphorically as a love song. So he's saying essentially, baby, don't go, don't leave me. It's kind of a throwback to every love song from that era. But of course, he's speaking to America as a whole. He's saying, don't revolt, don't leave the influence of the monarchy, which is just really clever and works dramatically. And
he pops up all the way through commenting on the action as well from a different perspective, which is quite interesting too. I mean, obviously Lin-Manuel Miranda, see if I can say it, is a wonderful wordsmith and lyricist. I always find his music is more about Stephen Aramis more than him. What do you know about Lin as an actual musician, and what do you think of him as a composer? I think that he has a real talent both when writing with a contemporary voice as well as traditional one. And you hear this both in Hamilton and earlier in The Heights. He can write a traditional ballad or something that feels very musical theater-y or very stylistically reminiscent of yesteryear very fluently. You just tend not to notice it as much in Hamilton because there's so much cleverness in the lyrical analogies and the wordplay. But there's some really beautiful moments and also some stirring musical underscore, just musical treatment of subjects. I think the Battle of Yorktown is a spectacular musicalized scene, and a lot of it is the music part of the music rather than just the rapped narrative. So he's clearly a man of
diverse musical talents, if that's what you were asking.
But do we know how much of that is him and how much is the arranger, Stephen Aramis?
Well, with the idea to have themes coming back, I mean, to write a good pop song hook is really hard. And a lot of pop songs nowadays have to have several hooks.
Immediately,
yeah, exactly. And My Shot, for example, has about 3 or 4, which come back over and over and over again. And they're all written by him. And just that itself is quite a clever idea. Also, the fact that he's so respectful of musical theatre that's gone. I mean, there are references to... I mean, the thing is, you say that... You're always saying to me, pop songwriters don't know how to write musical theatre. We've had so many kind of... like Dolly Parton, for example, or like Kinky Boots. You've had problems with pop song writers trying to write musical theatre. And the fact that he is... so obviously experienced in hip hop and, you know, R&B and all those other styles, but he does know his musical theatre. We have references from Gilbert Sullivan to South Pacific. A lot of these are lyrical things, but you know, you do like there's a Les Mis moment at the end of Act 1 where all the themes come back, and that was in it. He actually says that was inspired by Les Mis. You know, so he's so respectful to other styles and things that have been, as well as there being tons of references to contemporary hip hop songs. So I think he is a talented composer as well as a talented lyricist. But it's that in this particular piece, I think the lyrics outweigh the music slightly because there is so much of it, and that's down to the rap.
I have got a ticket, listeners. I treated myself to...
I don't know how he did it.
I just found it online.
I had a look, I couldn't find anything. It's so annoying.
They still have them. We'll have a look afterwards. But I'm just worried with a lot of... I'm going to use the term overhyped shows now because... it hasn't opened here. There is a lot of hype for it, and it obviously is a brilliant piece, but I'm worried that if I don't like it, I will feel cheated with myself because everyone else loves it. Does that make any sense,
and
right?
most people that are like, oh, I can't possibly live up to the hype, like myself, as actually, this is a fantastic piece of art.
Obviously, Mike, you've seen it in LA or New York?
I saw it in Los Angeles.
Right. LA isn't... it's not a theatre town like New York is.
Sure, we do have some respectable large venues, but we obviously have to watch the touring versions of all the major productions rather than the Broadway cast. When the show came here, it had already been out for a year and a half in New York, so everyone had listened to the cast album, everyone had experienced the hype remotely, and everyone was familiar with the show. So it wasn't the experience of discovering this new phenomenon so much as finally getting to see firsthand something you essentially knew through other media.
This is interesting, this conversation, because I do not know this piece, so I'm looking at it completely from someone who looks at the industry and trends. I don't see it being the same massive success it is on Broadway, because once the hype has died down, I don't see it lasting with the coach tours from, you know, the outer regions of the country and things like that, but I hope it does, because
I think you'll be surprised, because I do understand where you're coming from, and I said this about Billy Elliot. I said the Americans are not going to get this. Well, the accent's going to put them off completely, but in essence, the reason Americans like Billy Elliot, for example, is because it's a rags to riches story, and because this is so interesting, like Hamilton is a rags to riches story in the first half, there's enough in there to interest different people. And also, I've spoken to so many different people. I spoke to a friend of mine who's a classical musician, and he's quite a few years older than me, and he was saying how much his daughter loves this musical. And he was saying, so I gave it a listen, and I was surprised at how good the music is. And he's coming from a completely like academic point of view. In America, you've got like politicians quoting it and stuff like that. I think you'd be actually surprised how much this music can actually speak to people. I mean, Lin-Manuel Miranda, I can't say it. Lin-Manuel Miranda has been compared to like Shakespeare because he's taken a difficult subject and he's put it into a language that normal people can understand. And I know people that are like 16, 17 are interested in seeing this musical. They're not necessarily interested in musical theatre. And I know people are like in the 40s and 50s that are interested in seeing this musical. I think you'd be surprised. I think it actually will speak to more people than you think. I think in America there's obviously that element of it's American history, whereas that might not interest some people here, but it might. I mean, I'm interested in it from that point of view because I love history, so it's like opened up a whole area of history.
But you love it because of the musical.
Now I've listened to it, and I'm actually more interested in it from a history point of view, and I've actually gone away and read a put on it like a massive nerd, which is not something I think loads of like 16-year-olds would do. I think people like it for different reasons, but there's so much in it that speaks to so many different people. Whether it is massive as it is on Broadway, that's, you know, it could be something down to the fact that it speaks more to Americans than it does to us British people. But at the moment, like, it's interesting. Like, I think it has so much to say in the climate politically as well. So there's a lot of parallels between what's going politically in America and in the UK. So you never know. It might speak to people in this country quite a lot as well.
This is a case where there is both hype and a underlying show that's very substantial and striking and lovable. So you have to ignore the hype and actually address the experience on its own terms. The hype can be off-putting, especially if you're hearing people rave about something you haven't seen for a long period of time. You can almost build a resentment against other people telling you that you should love something. So I liken it to the first time I heard the song Stairway to Heaven, when I'd heard about it so many times and people had revered it as this iconic rock anthem. So I had to sit down and say, okay, forget all the raves the song has gotten and the quoting of the opening guitar lick as kind of this immortal signature in rock and roll music. Let me just listen to it on my own terms. And then I was able to bond with the song. And I think there's a similar experience in store for you with respect to this show.
That was definitely my experience as well. I don't listen to pop music, and I know so many people that do, or they're like 16, 17 years old, that are like properly interested in this musical. Am I at that age where I'm just not going to be into this or allowed to be into this? And actually, I just put all that aside and just thought, I'm going to sit down and just listen to my own terms and actually get from it. Try put the hype to one side and just try and listen to it and just forget about that. And then, if I like it, then I can get involved in all that.
I think that's why I'm lucky with this show, because I'm going on my own, and we're going to discuss this topic in another episode of Musical Talk, visiting the theatre on your own. And in a way, I'm glad I'm going on my own, because I cannot be influenced by anyone else's. If I went with Tonia, she would be yakking away in my ear about it for 2 hours.
I would be yakking away in your ear, but I'd be really excited.
Whereas I can just go and watch it and really appreciate it on my own.
But unless you go and see it in an empty theater, you're not going to escape the emotional responses of other people spilling over into your experience. True. Not with this show. There's going to be people, it'll be like Jesus Christ Superstar. People will be screaming and applauding after solos. The energy in the room, especially for people who spent the money on early tickets, the energy in the room is just going to be huge.
You're going like just a month after it's opened. The hype will still be massive. There'll be loads. I mean, I've got friends that are going that could only get tickets for January. It's going to be, and they've been waiting for a year for these tickets. It's going to be an amazing experience to go then, because
whereas
the audience will be really
I
excited.
paid £35
That's
for
so
my
lucky.
ticket, and ow, she's punched me again. I am excited for it. It'll remind me of when I saw the second preview of Wicked here in London with Adina years and years ago. You could literally just feel the excitement in the theatre, and you don't get that very often, I find.
Again, when you're seeing an early show, especially when tickets are so pricey, although in your case they're not, you're self-selecting to be in an enthusiastic audience. The people who want to show up and see it early on are just going to be into the show, and this is also a show that skews young, so enthusiasm is going to be naturally higher to begin with.
In 20 years' time, you'll be able to say, I was there.
Yes.
The problem with a lot of contemporary musicals, like, for example, Rent. Now when I listen to Rent, I think, oh, God, it's so dated.
It's 25
so
years old.
Oh, it's awful. How old is it now? No. 90s. It'd be like 20 years old, something. And I just think, I just can't stand listening to it. Well, I never really liked it very much anyway. Do you think this musical will last the test of time?
I do. I think the music will slowly be perceived as period pop rather than contemporary pop. That's natural. It's no longer going to sound quite as cutting edge as it does now. But a difference between Hamilton and Rent is that there is an actual story theme to Hamilton. There is. Rent is about a bunch of dudes hanging out and being sad. I mean, La Boheme barely has a plot, so Rent barely has a plot.
But the music hasn't aged well, though, in Rent. It just hasn't aged well, whereas I just think this will, because he kind of makes a lot of references to 90s pop music and hip-hop and rap, but it still sounds so contemporary today.
Well, when 25-year-old Hamilton is fresh as it sounds, it will not. It's hard to say. It's a subjective evaluation, obviously, but I think Hamilton as a musical story will definitely age better because it is about something in particular, whereas Rent is very vague and general at points. The songs in Rent don't always mean anything specific. The opening of Act 2, Seasons of Love, that's not about anything. So it has a kind of eternal quality at the cost of subject matter, and I think ironically that makes it more dated. Whereas Hamilton is about a particular series of events and the thoughts and associations of those events and how they relate in particular to the subject of integrity. And I think because there is a story theme, because there's something that's going on, the show is going to it'll outlive Rent, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
Rent never did well here.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Rent never did very well here.
But I think audiences' attitudes have changed. That brings you back to another point, is that Rent was written about a specific time, using music of that era, whereas Hamilton cleverly was written about the 18th century, I presume, and it's using music from the 20th century and the 21st century. I also hear there's no set. The lighting plays a massive part in this show, and also the choreography, with things like there's lots of rewind moments where they literally go back in time.
There's one rewind moment, really. I don't know. Mike's seen it, so I've not seen it. So
the rewind moment is when one of the characters says rewind.
Yeah.
So you can't miss it. Rewind. The set is abstract. There's quite a bit of set decor, but it's abstract within the time period. Maybe it's set up to look like an 18th century pub or something unspecific.
Or a shipyard or something like that.
It's suggestive of the time and place without committing you to any particular location, which I think is necessary given how many locations the show encompasses.
Yeah, but, from what I've managed to sort of see, because I've seen a couple of clips on YouTube, it's quite Brechtian in style because there's no set. The set is changed before your eyes by characters bringing things on and off, but also there are loads of other elements like physical theatre, lots of physical movement and multi-role playing. There are characters which are played by one of the characters plays Lafayette, and then he changes to Jefferson in the second half, so there's lots of multi-role playing going on and lots of stuff like that. The characters directly addressing the audience, that's massively Brechtian too, so there's quite a lot of Brechtian elements in it.
Sounds like Once in the same kind of vein, but with better songs. Mike, it's like a game. When you get a game that's so complicated, you have to read the 50-page manual that came with it so you're able to start the game.
I never do that.
I just feel that I have to really know this world to enjoy this piece.
You will have a leg up if you read a little bit about Hamilton's life, even if it's just the first 3 paragraphs in Wikipedia. It'll help orient you so that you understand the events that are being referred to, sometimes very rapidly. It's not necessary, but it'll help. And again, I do recommend listening to the cast album beforehand, or at least the first act.
But also, as well, taking the musical in a way with a pinch of salt, because it's highly sanitized. This is 20 years of history into 2.5 hours. There are lots of things missed out or changed and/or
for dramatic license.
There's lots of dramatic license, which I think Mike gets a little bit more annoyed at being American than I do, because it's not out of history that I particularly know anything about until now.
There are little liberties he took with historical detail.
Lots of historical detail.
Obviously, it's a stylized presentation, right? When Hamilton and Lawrence and Lafayette did not get together in a pub and rap. Obviously, there's a lot, just by dint of the musical language, a lot of the story is being transformed into a way that didn't happen. I was going to say that you have a long sequences of events that are compressed into hip-hop narratives. And this is one thing hip-hop is really good at. As we alluded to earlier, it's condensing information and giving it to you directly. So the language, the diction, the style of presentation, of course, couldn't be further from the language used of the period, but that's by design.
The Reynolds pamphlet was a 92-page document about how Hamilton cheated on his wife, and it's condensed to a 4-minute song.
Musical theatre is great, isn't it?
With they literally yell highlights, and then they give you the highlights of the pamphlet. I don't even know, like 4 minutes or something. The whole idea of the musical balances on this idea that Hamilton threw away his shot in the duel at the end, where he gets shot. It's not a spoiler, they say it in the first song. That's actually not 100% historically accurate. No one actually knows what happened in that duel, because there were so many different accounts. Burr changed his accounts all the way through his life about what actually happened in that duel. So the whole idea of the musical actually balances on this historical detail, which is really sketchy. In a sense, it's quite historically inaccurate in many, many ways. And then we talked about the character of Angelica Schuyler is changed quite a lot. And also the fact that it's alluded to that Burr and Hamilton were friends all the way through. And it's very highly unlikely that they were actually friends. Work colleagues, yeah, but friends, enemies definitely, but friends is not a possibility. There are
a number of exaggerations for the sake of telling a good story, and I think the Hamilton-Burr friendship / rivalry is the core of the show.
Yeah.
Once you strip away a lot of the digressions and the spectacle, there's this Mozart Salieri style contrast of two people with two different approaches to integrity. And that's really what we're following. There are a lot of digressions from this track, but in order to make that click, the story throws them together in situations more often than happened in real life.
Yeah.
There's a duel early on with two other characters. I think it's Lawrence and General Lee. And Hamilton is the dual second of one guy, and Burr is the second of the other, which didn't happen in reality.
Yeah.
But it's a great little way to have them touch base with each other, and it also foreshadows the duel that Burr and Hamilton will have.
Yeah.
So it's very, very cleverly done.
It's clever, but he does take a lot of poetic license. And you have to think, actually, as artists, do we have a duty to reflect history correctly, or can we take some poetic license?
Well, no, you're creating a piece of theatre, so you look at it and think, what would the audience be interested in? Will this work on stage?
Yeah.
Like Les Mis, for example, they cut entire swathes of books.
I mean, I'm completely playing devil's advocate. The fact that people change history to make it dramatically interesting has happened for years. Shakespeare did it in his plays. He had Julius Caesar say "Et tu, Brutus," and he actually never ever said that, but everybody thinks he did. People will think, because Hamilton's been such a massive phenomenon, people think that a lot of these things happened, which didn't actually happen.
Well, also it's down to what you want the audience to hear. Like Wicked is a good example, because the novel of Wicked, which they sell in the theatre to children who see the show,
It's not a children's book.
Is not a kid's book at all. So you want to give people what they want in a way. And Wicked, funny enough, talks about that in history, saying none of it's true. You know, how on earth do we know what happened?
We don't know what happened. And some of the details that he does add in Hamilton didn't happen. Like, Angelica Schuyler's actually married in real life, but she's not in the musical. Do we have some responsibility?
No, I don't think if he were writing a reference book about Hamilton as an educational tool, it would be wrong.
But this musical has been used as an educational tool in schools. Personally, I don't mind. But some people might say, well, actually, this is
someone
massive...
someone like me who has no knowledge will go into it and think, oh, that's...
Yeah, that actually happened. Which
I think the stylization of the show is so extreme, as is the casting, that I think the second you go down, you realize you're seeing an interpretation of history that's not meant to be taken literally. In real life, George Washington wasn't black. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, well, you see that. Yeah, exactly.
The casting alone tells you that it's not meant to be super literal. And, you know, the cabinet debates in the government are portrayed as 90s era rap battles, which is also brilliant. But it's no one is going to go in there thinking that they're seeing anything close to a documentary.
Obviously, this is part one of a two-part conversation that will occur once I've seen the show, because there's not much I can really add to this other than the fact is...
It's just sat here looking a bit confused.
I have to see the show now, and I'm a bit scared. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And I will admit, when I booked the ticket, I had a warm feel of excitement that I haven't had for a show in a very, very long time. So, and I know it'll live up to it because, as you said, we have this early adoption crowd, if you call it that, coming from the tech world. I'm really, really excited. And I can't believe I got a ticket a month before for 30 quid.
That was lucky.
I kind of hate you for that.
I know.
Yeah, I do
a lot of people do, but
I'm with you there.
You know.
It's exciting, and there's so much because it's such a complex piece of work. There's so much in it that you could discover or talk about. Well,
I just hope if you're in the show and you're listening, good luck. You're very, very lucky. I know a couple of friends.
Sorry, I saw Lin-Manuel Miranda is actually in London right now. I saw on Twitter actually advising the cast of Hamilton. That's how close to the show again.
He put on Twitter the most British vocal warm-up exercise ever when they went. They sung Judi Dench to the William Tell Overture.
Of course.
Judi Dench. So I guess we shall continue this conversation sometime in January, Mike.
That would be lovely. And in anticipation of that follow-up show, Nick, what do you anticipate with respect to your own experience and the reception of the show in the UK? And then we'll revisit those two topics when we reconvene later.
I anticipate probably confusion because I'm not the smartest cookie in the box when it comes to understanding very complex stories. Why are you shaking your head?
No, because I know how much you hate Les Mis. I think you'll be fine with this. I mean, it's fast, and there's a lot of rap in it, but they tell you all the way through. I think you'll be fine.
Good.
You'll know what's going on.
And I expect to be fully blown away and leave the theatre feeling slightly smug that I got to see the show.
Well, I think we can feel confident that you'll have that experience.
Yeah. What do you think I'll get out of it, Mike and Tonia?
That's hard for me to project. I think you're going to have some trouble with lyrical intelligibility if you don't listen to the cast album. There are some lyrics that I couldn't understand after repeated listenings to the cast album, so I will say you do not have a prayer following those lyrics. But I think you'll get the gist, and I hope that you're able to see the through line that I discussed, despite the fact that the show is so inclusive of detail.
I think you're from a music perspective, you're going to enjoy it. I think you're going to enjoy it. You're going to enjoy it because it is so respectful to everything that's come before. And I think you're not going to feel completely at sea thinking, "Oh my God, this is hip hop," and I don't get any of it. I think you are.
I enjoy hip hop for its lyrical brilliance.
Well, I think hopefully you'll have fun spotting some of the musical theatre references in there when you watch it too.
I'm very, very much looking forward to this show, Mike and Tonia. Thank you very much for letting me hear all about it.
Thanks for enduring our insider, rapid-paced back and forth from the perspective of an outsider.
It's all right. But much like the musical will do for most Brits that see it.
Well, I guess we'll pick up in early next year.
Musical Talk.
Hello again, musical talkers. Thanks for having me back on the program. It's your resident American friend, David Herzog. Hope you've all been well. Back in 2006, I worked as a performer at the Downstairs Cabaret Theater in Rochester, New York. I was working on 2 of their musicals in rep, one of them being the classic I Love You, You're Perfect, Now Change. Also running in rep that winter was the one-man musical George M. Cohan Tonight, which a lot of our listeners will know that I eventually had the good fortune to perform in here in London. But back in New York and in Rochester, the part was originally played by British musical theatre actor and singer Jon Peterson. Jon was a huge inspiration to me as a performer. He was always very kind and generous to work with. And recently I was able to catch up with him over a Skype chat to talk about his vast career in musical theatre and what projects he's currently working on now. Oceans shall not divide us. Skype, bring to me my tap-dancing friend from New York. Post-haste. Hello, folks, and welcome back to Musical Talk, and we are here talking with Mr. Jon Peterson. Jon, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's nice of you to throw me on your show. It's great.
No, it's great to have you on here. I mean, you've got the sort of the epitome of a career that, you know, we love to hear stories of on this program. A career that's crossed the ocean here. You know, you've had a
one disaster to the next.
No. You've been in some amazing productions here, you know, in the UK for our listeners here and for our listeners in the US. And, you know, it's a thing that, you know, a lot of actors aspire to, you know, and it's
Really?
Absolutely.
Because any life viewed from the inside is just one cataclysm followed by another, isn't it? So I just don't see it. I just go, really? I'm still trying to break the show business.
No, you're much too humble, fella, and you've written about this beautifully on your own website, on your biography. I was enjoying reading that the other day, just to sort of, you know, remind myself of some of the. What's that?
It's just sort of evolved, you know. I thought, well, you have to write a little bio here, don't you? Because that's what people do. And then
Right.
I just sort of started writing like a diary, and it became very libelous, actually.
How did you get started in the actual, you know, musical theater industry?
Oh, gosh, well, I always wanted to be in musicals. I'm sorry if you can hear New York going on in the background. It's just silent.
It's all part of the ambiance. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So I always wanted to be in musicals since I was, you know, I used to watch Gene Kelly movies on the TV when I was 6 or 4, and started taking dancing classes at 7, and it turned out that I was good at ballet, so they told me, and so they kind of pushed me into the ballet thing, and I went to the Royal Ballet School in London for about almost 9 years, until I was just almost 18. So, and I went there when I was 9, so it's almost 9 years, just terribly good training, but the wrong direction for me, but I was good at it, and I had all these sort of conflicts of, I can do this, you know, that's good, I look rather nice, but I didn't want to do it. I spent a couple of years being unhappy, and then I thought, I wanted to do musicals, didn't I? So that's it, and I was actually in a ballet company in Manchester, the Northern Ballet, which used to be based in Manchester, and I got my equity card. And when you get your equity card in those days, it meant that you could do what the hell you like. So
Right.
I called in sick from the ballet company, got the train down to London and auditioned for The Sound of Music, and got it. But on the way back to Manchester, I bumped into the guy who runs the ballet company on the train. He said,
no kidding.
What are you doing here? Aren't you sick?
Right.
So that's what I did, yes. I ended up doing what I wanted to do, and my first musical was with Petula Clark. You know, it was
Brilliant.
very exciting for me. I was 18, and she was just lovely and fabulous, and just watched her from the wings and learned, you know, what it was like to be a consummate professional. And she was a very shy lady, very sweet to us all, but not very show busy at all. She was just this very shy, sweet, gorgeous lady that went home to bed at the end of the night, or so we assumed. I don't know.
Right.
And so that was how I started, and then I was still dancing, and I did all those pop videos in the 80s for like Cliff Richard and Duran Duran and all that lot.
Oh, wow.
So I was one of Arlene Phillips' boys, which was really exciting.
Arlene Phillips, brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. What was it like working for a woman of her caliber?
She was fantastic, really strict. And we were always a little scared of her, but just loved her because she was just one of us. She was Molly Malloy's assistant for years, and really knows the business and really knows how to construct things and make things work. She's just this great vision, and you could not deny that. And it was just, and she was so lovely and so loyal to people that she saw, any sort of talent in, always hiring us for things. And I was so lucky to work with her, and we stayed friends. We stayed in touch over the years, and she's just wonderful, just a wonderful lady. I can't say how much I adore her. I can't say enough how much I adore her.
So sort of take us back to that moment. So Sound of Music was your West End debut, was it not?
It was 1981.
Okay, not terribly long ago in the grand scheme of things. So sort of take us through that. What was that like to sort of step on the stage for the first time on London's West End?
Well, it was exciting, but as a student at the Royal Ballet School, we were in all the ballets at the Royal Opera House. So from the age of 11, I started doing those, like the Midsummer Night's Dream, The Dream, Frederick Ashton, Sleeping Beauty, in which I had to hold. I was 11 and about 4 foot tall, and I had to carry on this huge rod with a lampshade on it, which was about 20 feet tall. And during the performance, I couldn't hold it anymore, and it just sort of tipped forward and fell across
goodness.
the middle of the stage. But it simply was trying to do something fancy on point. And so they took that away from me after that, and I just had to stand there.
Oh, bless your heart.
So this is my ballet career. It wasn't terribly exciting. But it also wasn't the first time I'd been knocking around on those big stages, but it was something I wanted to do. And when the orchestra struck up, it was what I wanted to hear. It wasn't Les Sylphides or something. It was actually, Rodgers and Hammerstein. I thought, this is it. Now I know where I am. So now I could get going on my life. And I could stop doing drugs and smoking cigarettes and be happy.
Right. And was the Rodgers and Hammerstein repertoire, was that something that you were already interested in as a performer?
Actually, not particularly, no.
Okay.
I love the Sound of Music, but I didn't have a particular, I'm a Sondheim boy. In fact, Rodgers and Hammerstein is not my favorite at all, even though I appreciate them. I suppose because I'm older now, I'm kind of tired of all those big old musicals, because I've seen them 200 times, and I know what's coming, and it's hard to stay excited about it, isn't it? Unless you're a musical theatre queen, I suppose.
Sure, yeah.
There's too much else going on in life to be that. But I knew I was doing something which was exactly what I wanted. I was on the right path now. I knew what I was doing. But of course, over the years, I've gone on and off the path and just trying to make a living,
Let's talk about who were some of the inspirations for you when you were either, just starting out in the business or when you were a young child. I saw on your website you had a particular affinity toward Fred Astaire, and particularly about the film, Broadway Melody of 1940, you mentioned a couple times in it.
Really researched, yes. Oh my God, when I saw that movie, Broadway Melody of 1940,
it's a brilliant film.
Eleanor Powell, and they did that famous Begin the Begin tap number on a black and white movie, and it was just a black, shiny glass floor. God knows how they danced on it. I think they had their taps on. They just added the taps later. They probably wore rubber or something. It was one of the magical dance numbers you could ever see. Anyway, that movie was so beautifully constructed and so fabulous. Every scene was a little vignette, it was beautiful. And it really made me see, this is the craft that I want to be involved in. What was I, 10 or something when I saw the movie, or younger, and I just knew. I thought, this is it. This is the world I want to be in. I've always adored Fred Astaire. He was a genius. The way he created all those amazing dance numbers. In one movie, he was tapping while playing golf. I mean, crazy stuff. Just a brilliant. So he was a genius, and it's so sad that so many kids don't know who he is now. The kids coming up, they've never heard of Fred Astaire or Gene Kelly or Judy Garland, or it's like you don't know why this business is great, become great. Just suddenly, these people made it good. They set the bar.
And were there any other particular inspiration? I mean, you mentioned quite a few names just there. Did you grow up with those films as well?
Yes. In fact, when I saw Judy Garland and Gene Kelly in For Me and My Gal, I was.
Very good show.
Yes, great movie, black and white again. I didn't know who Judy Garland was because I don't think The Wizard of Oz had been on the telly yet in England. I didn't think it came on the telly for another couple of years, so I'd never seen it.
Okay.
I didn't know who she was. I'd heard the name,
Mm-hmm.
and then I saw this girl, this beautiful girl on the screen, and I thought, oh my God, I'm in love. I was completely in love with this girl. It was like the biggest schoolboy crush you'd ever had.
Right.
Seeing her face made me cry. She was just, and I said to my mom, I want to marry that girl. How do I get to meet her? And she said, darling, she died about 2 years ago. And I was distraught. Like, oh my God, my future wife is gone.
Pleasure.
And of course, her with Gene Kelly was just magic. And that was another thing that made me go, all right, this is it. This is my world. So, and that's why I love doing the Cohan show, because it was all about vaudeville. The Gene Kelly movie for Me and My Gal was about vaudeville. And so I always wanted to be in vaudeville because of that movie. So when Cohan came along, which I did with Chip Gafar 10 years ago, it was just wonderful because that was my world. If I could be reincarnated, it would be in vaudeville in 1917 or something.
That's a brilliant era. It was a brilliant era. It was brilliantly, brought to life by you in that role. Because that was the first time I met you was when you were performing that show in Rochester, New York.
That's right, and then you went on to play the role in London.
Yeah. I did it in a fringe venue in London. We sort of swapped places. It's you had to go to as a British actor to to perform the role in America, and then vice versa for me.
Isn't that funny? It's so funny.
Life is funny, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. You never know where you're going to end up and why.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. Before you sort of made your way across the ocean to America, you were in quite a few successful shows over here, including you had a very good run in Cats, didn't you?
Oh, God, I love Cats. Yes, I joined the show. I think I was the third Skimbleshanks, so that's how long ago it was. It was 1985, I think.
Okay.
And I was far too young for the role. I was 22 when I joined the show, and Skimbleshanks is supposed to be in his 40s, this kind of like curmudgeonly old.
Okay, sure.
The railways couldn't run without me. He was a railway cat. And but I based him on Charles Hawtrey.
Okay.
I adored him. Very camp, carry-on film actor, and he would start every scene with, oh, hello. That was my Skimble. It was totally outrageous, and grew and grew and grew until it was bigger than Cats itself. And they had to keep pulling me back, and it was just, I had no sense of who else was on the stage at that point in my life. Like, oh, this is my bit. Something, memory, me.
Well, that's what they always say in show business. They always say, just start big, and we'll pull you back if we have to.
Exactly.
Don't ever go too small. That's the biggest rule, isn't it? So you did it right then.
That was Skimbleshanks' character, but it also happened to be my character at the time too. Like, oh, this is me, not me. In fact, there was one time where we'd do the show so much, and I sort of dried in the middle of the number, and I finished the line with the eval, and I didn't know what came next, and I went da 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 me, because that was all I could think of. So yes, I wasn't exactly a team player. No, but I loved doing Cat so much. There was something, almost one of the most wonderful things I've done in my life was Cats. The experience, because you have to be able to do everything pretty brilliantly. You have to be at the top of your game. So they have to be young, fit, and everyone gets knocked off one by one with injuries. And it was a wonderful. And Gillian Lynn, who choreographed the show and to all intents and purposes directed it too. Of course, Trevor Nunn did a wonderful job, but to maintain the show, it was always Gillian that we.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah,
she was another one. Like Arlene's just an absolute genius. And of course, I was a kid, and I was a stroppy little kid at the time. I was 22, and I wasn't good. I'd been to the Royal Valley School for 9 years. I didn't like authority. So when I first had to work with her, I was like, oh, I was just an awful child. And as I sort of grew up, because I did the show so much, I went back 3 times. And as I grew up, the last time I did it, I was in my 30s. And I just developed this huge love of Gillian Lynn because, I had to come up to her. I had to evolve to her level and realize what a genius she actually is. And magical. To rehearse with her was such an immersive experience. She would literally turn you into these characters from the inside out. And sometimes it was an agonizing process. But the rewards were, if you just would listen to every word she said and not question her, you would get the performance of a lifetime. And I can't, again, another person I can't speak highly enough of. If I could just work with her for one more day, have one more catch rehearsal with Gillian Lynn, I would give a finger. I don't mean the middle finger. I mean, I would sacrifice. I would chop a finger off. You know what I mean? Happily.
What has New York done to you, John? My goodness.
No, this is the London me.
Oh, fair enough. Okay.
You know what they're like in New York. You have to be eager and happy and grateful. I'm none of those, so I have to pretend when I'm in America. But when I'm talking to you, I can be the nasty old, bitter old London. But that's one thing I miss about performers in London is that they get bored really quickly in rehearsals. So after about 2 hours, you can hear like little whisperings of, "I'm so bored." I'm so over here. They're all, it's 6:30 and they've been rehearsing 8 hours, and all you want to do is go home and poop. And these kids are like, "Oh, I don't want to leave. It's so wonderful." And I'm like, "Oh God." The London boy in me is like, "Oh, just shut up."
We're very loud and emotional in my home country, aren't we?
No, it's wonderful. But what I love about being here is that actually, because sometimes I found in London working in musicals, it wasn't the performers I had a problem with, but the people, like a lot of the directors. This was it's going back 20 years now since I worked there, but I found a lot of the directors for musicals specifically weren't really immersed in musicals enough, didn't have a passion for musicals enough to be able to bring out those little moments of pleasure that musicals give to people who didn't understand it. So I would just rail against it in my mind, like, "Oh God." And so when I came here, people get it all the time, they get that, because musicals evolved here in America, so that's the essential element of a musical. That is, you can screw with everything else, but don't screw with those little moments of pleasure you get from a musical. They're almost ineffable, you almost can't describe them, but in London, a lot of people in my day didn't get that at all, and so the musicals were flat, dull, and they weren't as sparkly as the Broadway productions, and no one could understand why. And my opinion was that it came from the direction. But it's funny, all the little chorus guys I used to work with now, they're all big choreographers and directors. And, most of them weren't the ones I thought would be successful. And none of them will hire me, which is odd.
Oh, bless. We don't know what that's like.
I know.
We all feel each other's pain, don't we?
Yes, exactly. Show business is it's tough. It's tough.
You performed in all these productions in London. What brought you over to America?
Well, I did. The last thing I did was it the last thing I did? One of the last things I did in the UK was the national tour of Chorus Line.
Right.
The revival before the last revival. It was like 1997.
Okay. We
toured the whole UK, and for Bioc Lee, who was the original Connie Wong in Chorus Line, and she took, when Michael Bennett passed, she took over the mantle of the legacy of Chorus Line, and she directs most of the great productions of it around the world. And so I adore another woman I adored. Oh God, what a woman! See, I just meet all these fabulous women who inspire me, and they turn another chapter in my life, because I haven't met me for a while, so I think it's all over. But Bioc was this wonderful ball of fire. She just got a Tony Award this year for, I think, a Lifetime Achievement or,
did she?
or something. And
okay.
She's 73 or something now, and looks younger than me. She looks 40. No, she doesn't even look 40. That would be a disservice. She looks like 33 and in her prime. And I don't know how she does it. So she was a very inspiring lady, and she said, "I'll come over and assist me on some things,
okay.
And then we'll get you your green card." And I'm like, "Really? You would do that for me?" Because because I had kind of had it with the London scene by then, musicals, because it just was sort of, I was on a treadmill, I wasn't going anywhere, and I thought, what am I going to do? So that's how I got to go over to the States, and I got my green card, and then I got the tour of Cabaret.
Right.
And then I just sort of stayed, and then I became a citizen once I'd been there for 5 years, because you can do that. And I only did that because it's quicker at the airport to have 2 passports.
Yes, indeed.
Which one you use? You have that too.
Yeah.
And just go, "Oh, it's British passport at this end. Okay, here we go, have that." The British passports are quicker because you can use that little technology thing they have over there with the eyes and whatever it is. We haven't got that here yet. We still have to bring a bag of oats for the horse to get to. Then we over here. It's a little bit backward, but they're getting there, I think. But So she kind of saved me, really, because I probably would have, I don't know what I would have done. I suppose something would have happened. I did cabaret, and then 2003, I had open heart surgery. It all stopped for a couple of years, which was odd. Thank God I had good health insurance, because to be taken sick in America is literally taking your life in your hands.
Right.
So I had good health insurance, and I had the whole thing done properly, and I had a hole in the heart since I was born, and it just started really playing up, and they went in and dug it out, or sewed it up, and sent me on my way. But it took a couple of years before I could really do anything again. So that was hard, because when you're not working and there's no money coming in, and you have a New York apartment to pay for, that's tough.
Right.
But I got through it, and I'm fine now.
You've made the move, to New York, through the medium of a chorus line, which is a brilliant medium. It is an international, success.
It's a family. They call it a family, the chorus line. In fact, I think there's a Facebook chorus line family page. If you've done it professionally, you can join them. And it's lovely. We all connect, and
that's brilliant.
It's wonderful. Yeah, it's such an amazing show. Another one done. I'm so lucky. I have done the parts I wanted to do. There's just one part I haven't done. It's the roar of the grease paint, the smell of the crowd. I would love to do that, but it's such a terrible script. But the best score ever written for a musical.
It has some brilliant pieces in it. It really does.
Brilliant. I mean, there isn't a dud in there. Mm-hmm. It sort of rivals Evita. I mean, it's just brilliant. And yet the script, it was of its time, and it has not. You can't do it now. It doesn't work. Yeah. It's a shame. If they could just write a new show to that score somehow, it would have a whole new life. But don't tell anyone, because I want to do it.
Of course. So other than a chorus line, that brought you over to the U.S. initially, you talked about the tour of Cabaret. How did you come onto that initially?
Right. Well, I had done She Loves Me in the West End, and that was Rob Marshall who choreographed that show. Mm-hmm. And when I was over here, he said Cabaret had already opened with Alan Cumming on Broadway, and he said, well, we're doing the tour, and we need a standby for the MC. I think you'd be good for it. And I'm like, really? I auditioned for Cabaret in the UK, and they just basically said, oh, you never get to do this. No, you're a dancer. You know how they are.
Right.
They're like that now, aren't they? Once it's changed so much, because everyone can do everything now, can't they? Mm-hmm. Back in my day, if you were a triple threat, you were locked in a cupboard and told to grow up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like, don't be so cocky.
Right.
That's not British. So I auditioned, and I got it, and I went on the road, standing by for the role for I stood by for Norbert Leo Butz, who did the tour originally. Sure. And I had a little pager. It was before cell phones. Well, I had a cell phone too, but they weren't the modus operandi as they are now. Right. We still had our call messaging service in New York. You had a special number for messages. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes, indeed. Yeah. I feel like a teenager again. My goodness.
Oh, I know. Now we have cell phones. But anyway, I would be in a bar, and I'd have to call in on my cell phone at 7:30 at the half and say, is everything all right? Is Norbert okay? His thumb's not hurting today? Oh, okay. Well, have a good show. Call me if you need me. Put the phone down, pick up a cocktail, and start drinking.
Right.
That was touring life for me for 9 months. And then he left, and I took over, and I did the show for 2 years on the road.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just wonderful. I think Cabaret's, for me, the best musical. It's hard, because having done Cabaret, because it's so important, and it's so resonant now with what's going on politically.
Sure,
it's all about the rise of fascism and how they would slowly erode people's rights, and this is what they're trying to do now, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But because it's such an important show, any other shows now seem a little bit dumb to me. And, as I'm getting older too, musicals do seem a little less relevant to me than they were. Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, it was all about this fabulous world that was so much better than the real world that was nice to go into. But now, in my age, I just have to deal with the world I'm in, and so it's sort of wasting time escaping for a couple of hours. It's just, I haven't got time for that. How long do I have left? Mm-hmm. So, because Cabaret is so real and so visceral and so brilliant, having done it, it's hard to feel fulfilled doing other stuff.
I think that's fair enough. Yeah.
I'm rehearsing to Annie. I'm playing Rooster in Annie, and it's fun and it's great. It's a great show to do for Christmas. But it's just fun. That's it. It's not going to change my world.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about Cabaret is that, when it came out, it pushed the envelope so much. And, when you push it that far in a brilliant way, it's, I think that's why it's still relevant today. And it must be, it must be very special as a performer to partake in that because of that reason.
It really is. Because you really feel you're changing people's mindset. And people's mindsets need changing. Because we're all at heart, struggling against our natural tendency to be slightly bigoted and slightly pack mentality, and it's their fault, and I'm better than you, and that's human nature, and being civilized is fighting that, and and so this show really does shock people into changing their minds about that, and I would see people go. I just did the tour again this year, and people would come. I'd come out the stage door, and people would take one look at me. It wasn't because it was me, but they took one look at me, the MC, and burst into tears.
Really?
Burst like sobbing.
Yeah.
Say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's come over me, but I took one look at you, and it just thank you for the show, for the message, for we need this, and it's so moving, and it's a really, really precious gift to have been able to do that show. I tell you, and I've done it about 7 times altogether now, and.
Sure.
This year was the last time I did it. Did it for a nice 6-month run again. It was wonderful. Probably the last time now, but you never know. Someone might,
Yeah, you never say never in this business,
Yeah, you can never say never, right? But very honored to have been part of that.
And you got the chance to perform it on the Broadway stage as well, didn't you? Not just the tours.
I did, yeah. It was again, I was standing by, but because he was off so much, what was his name? He was sitcom star, the pretty one. I've forgotten his name.
It was John Stamos you stood by for. Yeah.
I say John Gordon Sinclair, but that was She Loves Me. Stamos. So I got to do it on Broadway. Wasn't that nice? Because they don't hire people for those roles on Broadway unless they've been on the telly.
Right.
So you have to. It's not like the old days where you could work your way up to. You have to be on the telly now. You have to be a reality star or a sitcom star.
Right.
And as I say, I'm never going to be that because of my chin. I don't have one. It was wonderful. Although actually the tour was a better production. It's funny, the Broadway productions are never the best. It's always the tours.
Yeah.
Because they're more committed because they're on the road. That's what they're there for. But in New York, they're like, "Oh, I've made it to Broadway. I'm a success. No, I'm not going to work today. Of course not."
Right.
I'll just go in and market tonight. So the Broadway one was not quite the experience the tour was, and then going back on the tour and the commitment it's a commitment. I like people's commitment on the road. It's a very special sort of, as I said, that's why we're here. We're in Milwaukee because we're going to do the show. There's no other reason to be in Milwaukee, for God's sake. Let's do this thing properly. So they do. Right. They have this enormous sense of commitment, which I just love. I get off on it,
Sure.
And then reward when the show's over, walking out the stage door, going for something to eat, and having done a good job and given all you've got. Anything less is just frustrating.
Sure.
Unless I'm giving my arse on stage, I don't feel like I should be there. I think, I could just go home. Unless there's blood on the stage when I leave, I don't see the point. Literally, I think I've been home now for the last 10 years doing all these tough shows. But anything else is just all right.
Well, that leads us nicely into talking about the work you've talked about already. The work you've done with playing George M. Cohan, which is how we met initially, was working on that show together in Rochester. And tell us about how you got started playing that role and sort of what that's meant to you.
I tell you, when I was doing Cabaret on Broadway.
Okay.
I think there was an ad in Backstage or something. I don't know what it was for. Triple Threat or come play George M. Cohan. And I'm like, all right. Oh, I like vaudeville. So I did an audition, and he gave me the job in the audition room. He said, "Yeah, I'll have you." I'm like, what?
That always feels nice.
Aren't you going to give me a little bit of attitude, make me feel unworthy, and then maybe give me a call back? Isn't that how it works?
Right.
So then we started work on it like the following week, and he sort of wrote it as we went. And I thought, oh, here we go. This is going to be dreadful. And it sort of evolved into being something fabulous. You know, and I think he did the right thing. He did it with, I think, 8 people first, and then it went down to, or 15 people, then 8, and then another production with 8, and then he had to do a 2-man version, and then he honed it down to a 1-man version, and so he, over a couple of years, and got it right, and then we opened it on Broadway, and it was a big success.
For our listeners, this is Chip Dufall we're talking about, who all...
He who shall not be named. Yeah, Chip Dufall.
We know, because we know who he is. We don't have to say his name.
He's just as you. Yeah. It's like these computer nerds that say, well, you haven't got a BQ28. I don't know why can't you just use the f-stop minus key? What are you talking about? Chip Dufall, yeah, he wrote George M. Cohan Tonight, ! It's like Lionel Bart, all his musicals had exclamation marks. Call it Twang, Blitz, or whatever they were.
Oh, anyway, yeah, and Oliver and the Hello Dollies and Mames of the world, yeah. It's following in a rich tradition.
Right, it is, yes, yeah. So George M. Cohan Tonight was not George M, because that was the famous predecessor to George M, which was wonderful, but it was a Broadway show in the 60s.
Right, exactly.
George M. Cohan was a wonderful guy, and faithful to his wife and all that, but we went a little bit more truthful.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, he was a character, he was a short man, so he had that Mickey Rooney Napoleon thing.
I think Mickey Rooney played him at one point in his career, didn't he? I believe.
I think he did.
Ironically, which was very fitting, you know.
Yeah, was it a TV version?
Exactly, I think it was. It was a TV version of some variation of his life. Yeah.
Yeah. If it was George. Yeah. So I mean, perfect casting.
Yeah.
But again, a wonderful show because it challenged you. You had to be triple threat. You had to be able to sing, dance, and act as good as anyone.
Right.
You know, you could. That's what frustrates me sometimes about these TV stars who come on. I'm not going to lecture. However, they're not triple threats.
Right.
And people like us, we can do what they do. They can't do what we do, but they get to do what we do. But we never get to do what they do.
Right.
So it's just so frustrating. But you have to be able to deliver the goods on that show, and that was another great challenge again. And that was the show that got me addicted to the challenge of setting the bar so high it's almost impossible to reach, and then reaching it, and you grow so much as an artist and as a person because you grow in confidence too. Although I don't know, because as soon as the show's over, I'm back to being this little, I don't think I can do that. No, they wouldn't want me, So I guess it's in your genes, but you can turn the genes off when you walk on stage, which is nice. I can actually be brave. So Cohan taught me a lot.
Now, you've already mentioned that you're working on Annie at the moment. Are there any other productions you have coming up that you need to give mention to?
Oh well, actually, I am doing for Chip Dufall. He's working on a new show at the moment, and again, it's a slow process, but it's about Irving Berlin. It's another one-man show, but this is about Irving Berlin. We're being a little liberal with our artistic freedom.
Okay.
In that Irving Berlin in this production sings and dances and taps.
Right, sure.
Which Irving Berlin never did. It's a great little show. We're still evolving it. It's still working on it. We did one performance about a month ago, just after I got back from the cabaret tour. I was sort of learning the script towards the end of the tour, and then we just threw it up there just to see how it landed. Had a small audience, and Chip's gone back to do some rewrites.
Sure.
And we're doing it again Mondays and Tuesdays. From sort of the middle of November through to the end of December.
Okay.
Because Mondays and Tuesdays are my days off from Annie. So I'm going to be what I'm going to be.
You're going to be a very busy boy at the very least.
I'm going to be singing tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's and it's at the 13th Street Theater in Greenwich Village in New York City, and I think it's every Monday and Tuesday from around about November 16th or around there. God, my dates are not good, but it's the middle of November. There are a few shows I can't do because they've thrown extra shows in for Annie, so unfortunately I'm not able to do all of every single Monday, Tuesday, but I guess there's a website for them, 13th Street Repertory Theatre.
Okay.
it's a lovely show. Again, we're still working on it. Things will be changing every time we do it.
Sure.
And I think Chip has a view to giving it a life maybe next year or the year after. Again, it's a process.
Sure.
I don't know if it will involve me, but I'm a good guinea pig because I just say yes to anything. Oh, I'll do that. Oh, yeah,
It's all part of the fun of the creative business, isn't it?
I think so. Just say yes to everything, and then see how it goes. Sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. And it's all an exercise. I treat everything like this as an exercise.
Sure.
In self-improvement and patience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it takes a lot of patience to be in this business, a lot of perseverance, doesn't it?
It does. It really does.
And for people who want to see you in Annie, where can they see you in that?
Yes, it's the John Engerman Theatre. It's in Northport, Long Island, which is just outside New York City. I think it opens November 9th, and it runs right through to December 31st, to New Year's Eve.
Excellent.
And it's Annie. It's a wonderful show, and I've only been working on it for a few days, and the cast are just lovely, just fantastic. We have a fabulous Miss Hannigan.
John, thank you so much for being on the program today, and thanks for sharing all the good fun of your career with us today, and all the good stories.
Thank you. It's been fun chatting, and thank you for even wanting to hear what I have to say, because I don't want to hear what I have to say.
We love hearing what you have to say, and hopefully we'll stay in touch with you in the future and catch up with your career on down the line as well.
Oh, I hope so. I might come to London next year and do my little Anthony Mooney show, so I'll let you know.
Absolutely, and we'd love to catch up with you over that as well. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be great? Yeah.
You can catch Jon Peterson as Irving Berlin at the 13th Street Repertory Theater in New York until December 18th. If you're stateside, you can visit www.13thstreetrep.org. That's the actual numbers 13 and then THSTREETREP.org. And there you could purchase tickets for those performances. Likewise, if you also want to catch John as Rooster in Annie, you can go to engemantheater.com, and that's ENGEMANTHEATER.com, and that runs until the end of the year as well. For those of you not lucky enough to be across the pond, you can visit John's website at johnpeterson.biz, and you can gather all sorts of theatrical pleasantries there, including video clips of John, as well as the means to purchase any of his singing and general niceness on his albums. As for me, I will be on the road in the new year with Image Musical Theater, performing as Little John in their new production of Robin Hood. You can follow all of my exploits, as always, on Twitter at DavidHerzog06. Have a great holiday, folks, and we'll see you at the theater. Bye-bye.
For more information about Musical Talk, please visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk. Email us at feedback@musicaltalk.co.uk. Listen to past episodes on iTunes and on YouTube, and follow us on our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You just started the show because it's got your name in it. I think that's...
My name?
Yeah, Ton.
Ton. Oh, yeah.
Ow.
Ton.
Star Wars fans are very happy as well.